Do you believe the EU and NATO countries betrayed the US at this crucial moment?
I think it was very disappointing. You have this, and again, look, the president and our country will have to re-examine all of this after this operation is over. But one of the reasons why NATO is beneficial to the United States is it gives us basing rights for contingencies. It allows us to station troops and aircraft and weapons in parts of the world that we would normally have bases. And that includes in much of Europe. And to see that in a time of need, the United States has identified a grave risk to our national security and our national interests, and we needed to conduct this operation. And we have countries like Spain, a NATO member, that we are pledged to defend, denying us the use of their airspace and bragging about it, denying us the use of their bases. And there are other countries that have done that as well. And so you ask yourself, well, what is in it for the United States? And I've been a big supporter of NATO. And one of the reasons why I've been a supporter of NATO is because I believe that these basing rights give us leverage and give us flexibility and operational capability all over the world. But if NATO is just about us defending Europe if they're attacked, but them denying us basing rights when we need them, that's not a very good arrangement. That's a hard one to stay engaged in and say this is good for the United States. So all of that's going to have to be re-examined. All of it's going to have to be re-examined.
After Spain made headlines by closing its entire airspace to U.S. military aircraft involved in operations against Iran, Italy has taken a more targeted approach, but one that still sends a strong signal to Washington. Italian authorities denied landing permission at Naval Air Station Sigonella for U.S. military aircraft, reportedly bombers or support planes, bound for Middle East operations tied to the U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran. This was not a nationwide airspace ban. Italian officials said the U.S. did not follow proper procedures, submitting flight plans after the planes were already airborne. Defense Minister Guido Crosetto denied permission, emphasizing that Italy does not allow its bases to be used for offensive strikes without parliamentary approval. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has reiterated that Italy will not participate in combat operations, providing only limited defensive support for Gulf allies. The denial reflects Italy's careful stance, honoring treaties while avoiding direct involvement in the conflict. Spain's full airspace closure cited the strikes as outside the UN Charter and called the war illegal. Italy's action, by contrast, was a mission-specific enforcement of rules, highlighting European caution. The Sigonella denial also complicates U.S. logistics, forcing reroutes and extra refueling, and underscores potential NATO tensions.
Spain has taken an unprecedented step, blocking U.S. military access in the middle of an ongoing war. And the signal is loud and global. Spain is not just distancing itself, it is actively resisting the U.S.-Israel military campaign against Iran. As of March 30th, 2026, Spain has officially closed its airspace to U.S. military aircraft linked to Iran operations. Not just from its own bases, but even flights coming from other countries like the UK or France are now being denied passage. That means U.S. warplanes must now reroute, taking longer paths over the Atlantic or through alternative European corridors. This move builds on an earlier decision. Earlier this month, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez blocked the U.S. from using key military bases in southern Spain: Rota Naval Base, Moron Air Base, both critical for U.S. operations in Europe and the Middle East. Spain made it clear these bases will not support what it calls an illegal war. In fact, Sanchez described the campaign as absurd, cruel, and a violation of international law. The fallout was immediate. More than a dozen U.S. aircraft, including refueling tankers, were forced to leave Spain and relocate. But what's now raising eyebrows globally is how Iran has responded. Iran's state media released a striking video, an IRGC member placing a sticker on a missile featuring Pedro Sanchez's image and his words calling the war illegal. Alongside it, a message, "Thank you, Prime Minister." A clear attempt by Iran to highlight divisions within NATO and frame Spain as moral support. Spain, however, maintains its position. This is not about taking sides, but about international law, sovereignty, and avoiding a wider war. A NATO ally openly defying the United States in the middle of a major conflict. The question now is Spain showing moral leadership or exposing cracks in Western unity at a critical moment?
Trump is now disavowing responsibility for getting us into this mess in the first place. He says it's up to our allies to reopen the strait without any help from the United States. He told America's closest ally, the United Kingdom, to, quote, build up some delayed courage, go to the strait and just take it. Okay. Then later in the day, Secretary of Defense Hegseth echoed that same sentiment.
It's not just the United States Navy. Last time I checked, there was supposed to be a big bad Royal Navy that could be prepared to do things like that as well.
And after that, Trump decided it wasn't enough to lay this all at the feet of our closest ally. He decided to rope in our oldest ally as well.
If France or some other country wants to get oil or gas, they'll go up through the Strait and the Hormuz Strait. They'll go right up there and they'll be able to fend for themselves. I think it'll be very safe, actually, but we have nothing to do with that. What happens in the Strait, we're not going to have anything to do with. We can take a machine gun from the shore and shoot a few bullets at a ship, or maybe an over-the-shoulder missile, small missiles. That's not for us. That'll be for France.
That will be for France. So now it's up to our allies to fend for themselves and open the Strait of Hormuz, even though it was Trump's war. Trump did this. That prompted its closure. Meanwhile, several other allies are snubbing Trump and his war of choice. Yesterday, Spain closed its airspace to all U.S. planes involved in the war. And today, Italy denied landing rights to U.S. warplanes at any airbase in Sicily. All of which has provoked even more outrage from Donald Trump. So Trump is alienating our allies, demanding that they clean up his mess. And at the same time, our adversaries are getting the VIP treatment. Today, a Russian oil tanker arrived in Cuba, despite a Trump-imposed embargo on all fuel shipments to that country. In other words, folks, Trump is giving Russia special permission to violate his own blockade, even though Russia is actively helping Iran target U.S. forces in the Middle East. Help me make it make sense.
NATO is a fantastic alliance. It served American interests and values well for many, many decades. We've had our bumps in the road over the decades. This is not the first time. But when President Trump came in, he disrespected our allies. He threatened to invade one of them. I want people to be reminded of that fact. He literally threatened to invade one of them, and he called the other one. He said, oh, they're just the 51st state, right? That's Canada. And then he put tariffs on our allies in a completely irrational way. It made no economic sense, made no national security sense, and he just disrespected our allies. So with that comes pushback, and it shouldn't have to come. This is a self-owned goal. We created this problem, but it is a tragic moment because in the long term, America, in dealing with China and Russia and Iran and North Korea, we need our allies. And right now, because of this war of choice, this is the greatest threat to the NATO alliance that we've had in the Trump era, and I'm deeply troubled by it. I'm scared by it. I hope we survive, but we are in some troubled waters right now.
That's been one of the most important things to do, is to build trust with our allies. What we've done with the trust that we've built in drops over 80 years since the NATO alliance was formed, we've thrown that away in buckets. To insult our allies, to do things without bringing them into the room and sitting around the table with us and conducting conversations about what we might do in military and diplomatic operations, which we've been doing for the entire administration, the current administration, is just vile. And to have the Secretary of Defense throw the insult of the big bad Royal Navy. I mean, coming from a guy who served as a platoon leader in the U.S. Army and then in the reserves, that's really a pretty bold and disgusting insult to one of our greatest allies. The same thing with the president insulting the French, as he's done with so many of our other allies, as Ambassador Fall just said. These are things you can't walk back. This is going to take a long time after this administration is over to try and regain some of our balance and some of our standing in the world. The problem is, too, it's not just the Trump administration now. I think many of our allies are looking at all American citizens and saying, what is wrong with you people? How can you allow this to continue? That's the concern I have, because, again, for the 4 decades of my military career, I proudly represented the United States. And during some of my recent travels, you can kind of see the damage that this administration has done, not just in terms of the thoughts on what the administration is doing, but what the typical American is thinking about what his or her government is actually executing.
Telling The Telegraph he is strongly considering pulling out of NATO. Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoing similar sentiments. Listen.
I've been one of the strongest defenders of NATO during my time as a United States Senator because I found great value in it. But when we need their help, not their help, we're not asking them to conduct airstrikes. When we need them to allow us to use their military bases, their answer is no. But I do think, unfortunately, we are going to have to re-examine whether or not this alliance that has served this country well for a while is still serving that purpose, or is it now become a one-way street where America is simply in a position to defend Europe?
Is that where this is headed, Dan? The United States leaving NATO? And if so, what about NATO, if anything, survives?
Look, I hope that's not the case, and we need to stop airing our differences publicly. That only helps our adversaries like Russia, which we're trying to deter Russia. I think what we need is a NATO summit behind the scenes. We need to discuss some of these tensions. Look, the NATO members will argue the United States didn't consult them before our attacks on Iran. And we will argue that NATO members were slow to come to our assistance when asked to do some things to help us in the war, to prosecute this war against Iran. So, look, both sides have issues we need to discuss, but best to do it privately. Let's leave the hyperbole out of this about leaving NATO. I don't think that's in the offing, and of course Congress would be very much against that, and they've passed the law that makes it clear that we won't without their approval. It's a congressional treaty. So, look, hopefully we'll have a summit and solve some of these outstanding differences.
Dan Hoffman, we asked you about a lot of things. You answer them all, and we appreciate that. Great insight this morning. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks. Have a good morning.
We spend trillions of dollars on NATO, and when we need them, which we never do. We didn't need them here either. To be honest, I was really asking because I wanted to see what they do. We didn't need them. We blasted the hell out of them, out of Iran. And the last thing I needed was NATO stepping in our way, because they're a paper tiger. NATO treated us very badly, and you have to remember it, because they'll be treating us badly again if we ever need them, and hopefully we're never going to need them. I don't think we will need them. I don't think they can do very much.